A truly beautiful mind. The story of Einstein tries to show him as a human being, a fairly ordinary person who had his likes and dislikes, his streaks of rebellion, and his problems. The class can think about how a great person was perceived before being recognized as great. It is not as though great people are born with a special sign that allows us to recognize them instantly. What qualities in a person then make them a genius or a great person? You can take the help of a science teacher to explain Einstein's theory of relativity, to talk about Einstein and build inter-subject cooperation. A truly beautiful mind. Before you read, what do you think of when you hear the word genius? Who is a genius? What qualities do you think a genius has? We shall now read about a young German civil servant who took the world by storm about 100 years ago. In the summer of 1905, the 26-year-old published in quick succession four groundbreaking newspapers about light, the motion of particles, the electrodynamics of moving bodies, and energy. His work took up only a few pages in scientific journals, but changed forever our understanding of space, time, and the entire cosmos, and transformed the name Einstein into a synonym for genius. 50 years after his death, Albert Einstein's genius still reigns, that is, rules. Albert Einstein was born on 14th March 1879 in the German city of Ulm, without any indication that he was destined for greatness. On the contrary, his mother thought Albert was a freak. Freak is a word used disapprovingly to talk about a person who is unusual and doesn't behave, look, or think like others. To her, his head seemed much too large. At the age of 2.5, Einstein still wasn't talking. When he finally did learn to speak, he uttered everything twice. Einstein did not know what to do with other children, and his playmates called him Brother Boring. So the youngster played by himself. So the youngster played much of the time himself. He especially loved mechanical toys. Looking at his newborn sister, Maza, he is said to have said, "Fine, but where are her wheels?" A headmaster once told his father that what Einstein chose as a profession wouldn't matter because he will never make a success at anything. Einstein began learning to play the violin at the age of 6 because his mother wanted him to. He later became a gifted amateur violinist, maintaining this skill throughout his life. Amateur violinist means here amateur stands for doing something for personal enjoyment rather than as a profession. But Albert Einstein was not a bad pupil. He went to high school in Munich, where Einstein's family had moved when he was 15 months old, and scored good marks in almost every subject. Einstein hated the school's regimentation. Regimentation here, order or discipline taken to an extreme, and often clashed with his teachers. At the age of 15, Einstein felt so stifled there that he left the school for good. The previous year, Albert's parents had moved to Milan and left their son with relatives. After prolonged discussion, Einstein got his wish to continue his education in German speaking Switzerland, in a city which was more liberal than Munich. Liberal here, willing to understand and respect others' opinions. Einstein was highly gifted in mathematics and interested in physics, and after finishing school, he decided to study at a university in Zurich. But science wasn't the only thing that appealed to the dashing young man with the walrus moustache. So, this is the image of Einstein in 1900 at the age of 21 and in 1955 as we remember him now. He also felt a special interest in a fellow student, Milava Mariek, whom he found to be a clever creature. This young Serb had come to Switzerland because the university in Zurich was one of the few in Europe where women could get degrees. Einstein saw in her an ally against the Philistines, those people in his family and the university with whom he was constantly at odds. Miss Merrick was also similar to Einstein. She was also not talking very much or having a get together or talking with the peoples. The couple fell in love. Let us survive in which they put their affection into words, mixing science with tenderness, wrote Einstein. How happy and proud I shall be when we both have brought our work on relativity to a victorious conclusion. In 1900, at the age of 21, Albert Einstein was a university graduate and unemployed. He worked as a teaching assistant, gave private lessons, and finally secured a job in 1902 as a technical expert in the patent office in Bern. While he was supposed to be assessing other people's inventions, Einstein was actually developing his own ideas in secret. He is said to have jokingly called his desk drawer at work the Bureau of Theoretical Physics. Patent means here a document which gives the rights of an invention to an inventor. One of the famous papers of 1905 was Einstein's special theory of relativity, according to which time and distance are not absolute. Absolute here measured in itself, not in relation to anything else. Indeed, two perfectly accurate clocks will not continue to show the same time if they come together again after a journey if one of them has been moving very fast relative to other. From this followed the world's most famous formula which describes the relationship between mass and energy, that is E is equal to mc square. So here is a small quote by the Einstein. When you sit with a nice girl for 2 hours, it seems like 2 minutes. When you sit on a hot stove for 2 minutes, it seems like 2 hours. That's relativity. Albert Einstein. While Einstein was solving While Einstein was solving the most difficult problems in physics, his private life was unraveling. Unraveling here is starting to fail. Albert had wanted to marry Mileva right after finishing his studies, but his mother was against it. She thought Mileva, who was 3 years older than her son, was too old for him. She was also bothered by Mileva's intelligence. She is a book like you, his mother said. Einstein put the wedding off. The pair finally married in January 1903 and had two sons, but a few years later the marriage faltered, became weak. Mileva, meanwhile, was losing her intellectual ambition and becoming an unhappy housewife. After years of constant fighting, the couple finally divorced in 1919. Einstein married his cousin Elsa the same year. Einstein's new personal chapter coincided with his rise to world fame. In 1915, he had published his general theory of relativity, which provided a new interpretation of gravity. An eclipse of the sun in 1919 brought proof that it was accurate. Einstein had correctly calculated in advance the extent to which the light from fixed stars would be deflected. Deflected here changed direction because it hit something through the sun's gravitational field. The newspapers proclaimed his work as a scientific revolution. Einstein received the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1921. He was showered with honors and invitations from all over the world and lauded by the press. When the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933, Einstein emigrated to the United States. 5 years later, the discovery of nuclear fission in Berlin had American physicists in an uproar, very upset. Many of them had fled from fascism, just as Einstein had, and now they were afraid the Nazis could build and use an atomic bomb because at that time World War was going on. At the urging of a colleague, Einstein wrote a letter to the American president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, on 2nd August 1939, in which he warned a single bomb of this type exploded in a port might very well destroy the whole part together with some of the surrounding territory. His words did not fail to have an effect. The Americans developed the atomic bomb in a secret project of their own and dropped it on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. Einstein was deeply shaken by the extent of the destruction. This time, he wrote a public missive, that is, a letter especially long and official. This time, he wrote a public missive to the United Nations. In it, he proposed the formation of a world government. Unlike the letter to Roosevelt, this one made no impact. But over the next decade, Einstein got ever more involved in politics, agitating for an end to the arms buildup and using his popularity to camping for peace and democracy. When Einstein died in 1955 at the age of 76, he was celebrated as a visionary and world citizen as much as a scientific genius. Visionary means a person who can think about the future in an original and intelligent way.